He brought life back to her beast. The queen offered him something so good, he couldn't refuse. The shuttle's landing struts bit into Azureth's platform with a sound like breaking glass, and Ethan Cross felt the vibration through his boots as artificial gravity surrendered to the planet's own pull. Heavier than Earth standard. He'd studied the specs during the 3-week transit, but data never captured the way weight settled into your chest, made each breath require intention. The airlock cycled open and azure light flooded the cramped passenger bay, so vivid it seemed liquid. Ethan shouldered his equipment case and stepped onto foreign soil for the first time in 8 months, squinting against brilliance that made his eyes water. The platform stretched before him in geometric perfection, each surface catching light and throwing it back transformed as though the ground itself was constructed from compressed starlight. 6 figures waited in formation. Tall didn't adequately describe them. Ethan stood just under 6 feet, and the shortest warrior topped him by half a foot, their bodies combining athletic grace with undeniable strength. Azure skin seemed to hold its own luminescence, darker blue along their shoulders and forearms where muscle defined itself beneath the surface. Ceremonial armor of deep blue and gold caught the light with each minute shift of weight, but their hands rested on weapons that looked anything but ceremonial. The central figure stepped forward, and Ethan's breath caught despite his preparation. Queen Lyshara moved like water given form, each step deliberate yet fluid. Her white hair cascaded over armor etched with designs too intricate for mass production, and the horns curving back from her temples bore markings that seemed to shift in his peripheral vision. When her eyes met his, sapphire depths assessed him with the clinical attention he usually reserved for specimens under analysis. "Dr. Cross," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in his sternum, "you will follow." Not a question, not a welcome. Ethan adjusted his grip on the equipment case and fell into step as the warriors closed around him in formation. They moved through corridors that defied his understanding of architecture, walls of that same crystalline substance, rising in curves that suggested organic growth rather than construction. The ceiling arched high overhead, and everywhere light refracted and reflected until he walked through what felt like the inside of a prism. No one spoke. The only sounds were footsteps and the whisper of armor, and Ethan found himself hyper-aware of his own breathing, his heartbeat loud in his ears. The warriors dwarfed him, their presence designed to diminish, and he recognized the psychology of it even as his hindbrain responded with uncomfortable awareness of his vulnerability. They descended. The corridors widened and the quality of light changed, growing warmer, more golden. The air grew thick with something Ethan couldn't quite identify, a scent like ozone and earth, and something organic that made the xenobiologist in him catalog possibilities. Then the passage opened into a chamber so vast his spatial reasoning failed for several seconds. The guardian Drake lay in the center of a space that could have housed a cathedral. Veilstorm. Even diminished by illness, the creature commanded absolute attention. Scales of cerulean blue covered a body the size of a small building, but those scales had lost their luster, appearing dull and lifeless as tarnished metal. The massive head rested against the chamber floor, amber eyes half closed, each breath a labored movement that Ethan could hear from 50 feet away. Around the Drake's resting place, equipment hummed and blinked. Medical scanners, environmental regulators, monitoring systems that spoke of desperate attempts at intervention. A handful of Azurethians in less ornamental attire worked at various stations, their movements carrying the exhausted precision of people who'd run out of options days ago. Lyshara stopped at what Ethan instinctively recognized as a formal distance from her guardian, her posture perfect despite whatever she must be feeling. When she turned to face him, her expression remained controlled, but her horns caught the light with a faint glow he hadn't noticed in the corridors above. 17 of our finest specialists have examined Veilstorm, she said, each word precisely articulated. They have found no disease, no toxin, no physical cause for his decline. Our symbiotic bond has persisted for 3,000 years, guardian to crown, and now it fails. Her eyes held his, and Ethan saw the thing she wasn't saying written in the tension around her mouth, the too still set of her shoulders. I summon you not from preference, Dr. Cross, but from necessity. My pride matters nothing measured against my people's survival." The admission cost her. Ethan recognized that particular flavor of desperation, the moment when all protocols had failed and you reached for the unorthodox because the alternative was unacceptable. He'd seen it in his own mirror often enough. "I appreciate your directness, Your Majesty," Ethan said and set down his equipment case. Several warriors shifted at the casual gesture, but Lashara raised one hand fractionally and they stilled. "May I approach him?" Her eyes narrowed. "The specialists require—" "I'm not a specialist in the way you mean," Ethan interrupted, then caught himself. Interrupting royalty probably violated a dozen protocols, but her expression showed calculation rather than offense. "Your equipment can tell you everything about his biochemistry, his cellular structure, his neural patterns. But I work with living beings, not datasets. I need to meet him." Silence stretched through the chamber. One of the attending Azurethians made a small sound that might have been skepticism or offense. Lashara studied Ethan with that penetrating gaze, and he held still under scrutiny, letting her look. Whatever she saw made her horns glow fractionally brighter. "Proceed," she said. Ethan walked toward Veilstorm with measured steps, aware of every eye tracking his movement. The drake's breathing didn't change as he approached, those amber eyes remaining half-lidded and distant. Up close, the scale of him rewrote Ethan's instinctive threat assessment. Each scale measured larger than his hand, the claws on one visible forepaw longer than his forearm. This creature could end him with a reflexive twitch. He circled slowly to Veilstorm's head, noting the way light moved across those dulled scales, the faint tremor in the membrane of one visible wing. The drake's breath washed over him, warm and carrying that organic scent he'd detected earlier, but underneath it something else. Something sad. Ethan glanced back at Lashara, found her watching with rigid attention, then he did something that made several warriors move forward before she stopped them with another minimal gesture. Not at a clinical distance with instruments, not separated by the barrier of professional detachment. Ethan Cross sat on the chamber floor beside Veilstorm's massive head, close enough that the drake's exhale stirred his hair and placed his bare hand against those dull blue scales. The texture surprised him. He'd expected rough, reptilian hardness, but the scales held warmth and a subtle flexibility, almost like touching living stone. Beneath his palm, he felt the slow thunder of Veilstorm's heartbeat, irregular and labored, and Ethan closed his eyes to focus on that rhythm. Behind him, someone whispered sharp words in the Azurethian language. He ignored them, letting his other senses expand. The drake's breathing, the minute tremors passing through that enormous body, the way the heartbeat stuttered and recovered, like an engine misfiring. "What are you doing?" Lashara's voice came from closer than before, controlled but with an edge. Ethan kept his eyes closed, his hand steady against Veilstorm's scales. "Listening," he said quietly. "Your specialists looked at the data. I'm listening to what he's trying to tell you. He is not sentient in the way." "He's grieving," Ethan said, and opened his eyes to find Lashara standing 10 feet away, her sapphire gaze locked on him with something between anger and shock. "Veilstorm isn't sick. He's lonely." The chamber fell absolutely silent except for the drake's labored breathing. Ethan stood slowly, keeping one hand on Veilstorm's scales. "Your bond is symbiotic, right? He doesn't just protect you physically. He responds to you, to your emotional state." He watched her face, saw the minute tightening around her eyes. "How long have you been ruling alone? How long since you let yourself feel anything in his presence except duty?" Lashara's horns blazed with sudden light, bright enough to cast shadows across the chamber floor. Her hands clenched at her sides, and for a long moment Ethan wondered if he'd miscalculated, catastrophically. Then she spoke, her voice low and dangerous and absolutely controlled. "You presume much, human." "I observe," Ethan said, meeting her eyes steadily. "And I'm right, aren't I?" The silence stretched. Then Lashara turned to her attendants with sharp precision. "Leave us," she commanded, "all of you." The warriors and specialists hesitated, but her tone allowed no argument. They filed from the chamber in rigid silence until only Lashara and Ethan remained with the dying drake. When the last footstep faded, she turned back to him, and the vulnerability that flickered across her face before she controlled it told Ethan everything he needed to know. "If you are correct," she said carefully, "what would you have me do?" 3 cycles on Azureth taught Ethan that light measured time differently here. The planet's twin suns created overlapping periods of brilliance and shadow, and he'd stopped trying to force his circadian rhythm into compliance. Instead, he worked when Veilstorm needed him. The treatment wasn't medicine in any conventional sense. Ethan dimmed the harsh lighting, introduced temperature variations that mimicked natural caves, removed half the monitoring equipment. The specialists protested until Lashara silenced them with a gesture. But the real work required something else entirely. "You want me to sit with him," Lashara said on the 4th day, "without armor, without attendance." "Without performance," Ethan corrected. "He doesn't need his queen, he needs you." Her eyes held his for a long moment. Then she began removing her armor, each piece set aside until she stood in the close-fitted undergarment beneath. She walked toward Veilstorm and hesitated before sitting, her hand coming to rest against those dull scales. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then she began speaking in her own language, words flowing like water. Ethan stepped back, giving her privacy, but he listened to the music of her voice, the way it occasionally caught. When he glanced back, Lashara had shifted position, her body curved toward Veilstorm's head, both hands resting against his scales. Her horns glowed with soft amber light. That night, when Ethan checked the chamber, Veilstorm's eyes were slightly brighter, his breathing easier. The pattern established itself. Lashara would arrive at irregular intervals, remove her armor, sit with Veilstorm in silence or soft speech. Ethan learned to time his visits to give her space. She no longer ordered him to leave. They would work in parallel, comfortable in shared purpose. On the 9th cycle, he found her sitting against Veilstrom's side, armor set aside. She didn't tense when she heard his footsteps. "His heartbeat is stronger," she said quietly. Ethan approached slowly. "The arrhythmia has decreased by 40%. "You were correct. I had forgotten how to simply be in his presence." Her fingers traced patterns against Veilstorm's scales. "I did not realize I had stopped sharing anything with him." He settled onto the floor at a respectful distance. "Grief changes. It transforms." Lashara's eyes found his. "Is that what you do, Dr. Cross? Transform grief into strength?" The question landed with unexpected accuracy. "I channel it into purpose. Not quite the same thing." "No," she agreed, "but perhaps close enough." They sat in companionable silence, and Ethan felt something shift between them. A small adjustment in the careful distance she maintained. "Your people fear Azurethians," she said. "Some do, but not you. I respect you. Respect and fear aren't the same. Yet you came alone to a world where warriors could end you without effort." Her head tilted slightly. "That suggests either courage or foolishness." "Probably both," he admitted, and was rewarded with the smallest curve of her lips. The moment stretched, and Ethan became aware of how close they were, despite the space between them. Aware of the way light played across her blue skin, the intelligence in her eyes. Then Veilstorm exhaled heavily, and the moment broke. Lashara rose, retrieving her armor. "I have council duties. Will you be here later?" "Probably. I've been sleeping in the observation room." Her hands paused. "That cannot be comfortable." "I've slept in worse places." She finished with her armor and moved toward the exit, then paused. "There are better quarters available. I will have them prepared." She turned back. "When we are here with him, you may call me Lashara." The cycles blurred together. Veilstorm's scales began regaining their luster, amber light returning to his eyes. He lifted his head on the 14th cycle, focusing on Ethan with clear intelligence. After a long moment, he huffed softly and lowered his head back to rest. Acceptance. On the 20th cycle, Lashara arrived without her escort, moving with unusual urgency. "We have a situation," she said. "Mineral extraction operations triggered a cascade failure in one of the stabilization nodes, the network that regulates tectonic activity." She pulled up a holographic projection showing Azureth's subsurface infrastructure. "Veilstorm is part of that system. His recovery has been stabilizing it, but if another node fails, the whole system could collapse. How bad? Continental, possibly hemispheric. Her jaw tightened. I need to assess the damage directly, 300 meters underground. I'm taking a small team. I'm coming with you. Her eyes snapped to his. Absolutely not. If Veilstorm's recovery is connected to network stability, you need someone who understands his systems. He met her gaze steadily. That's me. Lishara weighed protest against pragmatism. Pragmatism won. Gear up, we leave in 10 minutes. The descent took 2 hours through ancient tunnels, walls showing layered striations of compressed mineral. Lishara led with 3 warriors and Dr. Selinia, the lighter blue scientist who kept glancing at Ethan with open curiosity. Temperature rose as they descended. The tunnel narrowed until they moved single file, Lishara ahead with a scanner casting blue light across stone. The node chamber is just ahead, she said. Then the ground shook. Not violently, but enough to send dust cascading from the ceiling. Lishara's hand shot up, and they waited in tense silence. After 30 seconds, the tremor passed. Move, she commanded. They emerged into a chamber where massive crystalline structures grew from floor and ceiling, pulsing with sickly yellow light. Equipment lined the walls, much of it sparking or dark. Selinia Diagnostics, Lishara ordered. Ethan, tell me what you see. He approached the nearest crystal formation, studying the stuttering pulses. These are organic, living structures. Correct. Engineered 3 millennia ago to interface with the planetary core. Veilstorm serves as the apex of the network, but each node must maintain individual stability. This one's dying, Ethan said, pressing his hand against the crystal. It felt feverishly hot, the pulse erratic. Same symptoms as Veilstorm, stress response, not mechanical failure. Another tremor, stronger this time, loose stone pattered down. The instability is accelerating, Selinia called, her turquoise eyes wide, 20 minutes before catastrophic failure. Can you stabilize it? Lishara asked. He studied the crystal, mind racing. Maybe. If I'm right about the stress response, we need to calm the system, but I'd need to interface directly. That requires a neural link, Lishara said. You lack the biology. You don't. Ethan turned to face her. You're connected to Veilstorm. Use me as a filter. I'll read the node state. You translate through your bond. That's insane, one of the warriors said. Lishara ignored him, her eyes locked on Ethan's. The feedback could damage you. Your nervous system isn't designed for this. 20 minutes, Ethan reminded her. Do you have a better option? Her jaw tightened, horns flaring with light. Then she moved to the central crystal and pressed both palms against its surface. Come here. Ethan positioned himself beside her. She took his wrist, pulling his hand to rest just below hers on the crystal. Heat radiated through his palm. Open yourself, she said quietly, her voice taking on a resonance he'd never heard. Stop thinking, just feel. He closed his eyes and tried to quiet his analytical mind. At first there was nothing but heat and his own heartbeat. Then, gradually, he became aware of something else, a rhythm beneath the rhythm, vast and slow and hurt. The node's distress vibrated through him, but beyond it he sensed something larger. Veilstorm's presence, distant but growing stronger, and between them Lishara, her consciousness a bright thread connecting disparate points. I have you, she murmured, her voice inside his head. Trust me. Ethan surrendered control and sank deeper into the connection. The node's panic washed over him, fear and pain without words, and he responded instinctively with calm, with understanding, with presence. Not fixing, just being there. The pulse began to steady. Yellow light shifted toward amber, toward blue. Lishara's presence wrapped around his, guiding, supporting, and he felt her surprise at how naturally he moved through the connection. The crystal grew cooler, the tremors stopped. When Ethan opened his eyes, his legs nearly gave out. Lishara's arm caught him, supporting his weight as he sagged against her. That was, he started. Remarkable, she said softly, her face close to his, eyes wide with something between awe and confusion. You shouldn't have been able to do that. Did it work? Selenia's voice came from across the chamber. Node stability is climbing, 90% and rising. By the ancestors, how did you... Another tremor cut her off, but this one felt different, sharper, more localized. The tunnel entrance exploded inward with a roar of collapsing stone. Dust billowed through the chamber as debris rained down. Through the chaos, Ethan glimpsed figures in the settling dust, Azurethian warriors, but not Lishara's escort. Their armor bore different markings. Sabotage, Lishara breathed, her arm still supporting Ethan, then louder, to her warriors. Defensive positions. Her 3 guards moved immediately, weapons drawn. Selenia scrambled behind equipment. Lishara released Ethan and drew her own blade, the metal singing as it left its sheath. The attacking warriors advanced through the dust, and at their center walked a figure Ethan recognized from court briefings. High Commander Valeth, her darker blue-violet skin marked with ritual scars, one horn broken from battle. Her purple eyes fixed on Lishara with cold certainty. "Your Majesty," Valeth said, her voice carrying across the chamber, "I had hoped you would see reason before it came to this." "Stand down, Commander," Lishara ordered, her tone absolute authority despite their precarious position. "This is treason." "This is survival," Valeth countered. She gestured toward Ethan with contempt. "You bring aliens into our sacred spaces. You let them touch our guardian, corrupt our nodes with their presence. You make us weak." "I make us adaptable," Lishara said, "something you refuse to understand." "I understand perfectly." Valeth's hand moved to her weapon, "which is why you cannot be allowed to continue." The chamber erupted into violence. Lishara's guards engaged Valeth's warriors, blades clashing in sounds like breaking bells. Ethan pressed against the node crystal, still dizzy from the neural connection. Selenia crouched beside him, eyes wide with fear. 8 against our 4, Lishara's lead guard called out. "Poor odds. We've faced worse." Lishara's blade moved with deadly precision, but they were outnumbered underground with limited escape routes. Valeth stood back, watching with cold assessment. Her gaze drifted to Ethan, satisfaction crossing her features. "Kill the human first," she ordered. "Remove the contamination." 2 warriors advanced toward Ethan. He scrambled up, fingers closing around broken equipment, a metal rod with enough weight to matter. He didn't need it. Lishara moved between him and the warriors with impossible speed, her blade a blur. She drove them back with strikes that spoke of decades of training, her horns blazing with amber light. "You will not touch him," she said, her voice carrying resonance that felt like physical force. Valeth's expression darkened. "So it's true, you would choose this creature over your own people." "I choose survival over pride," Lishara shot back, "something you've never understood." "I understand strength," Valeth drew her own weapon, "and I understand weakness when I see it." She lunged forward, engaging Lishara directly. Their blades met in a shower of sparks, the sound echoing like thunder. The fight went beyond simple combat. This was personal, ideological. Another tremor shook the chamber. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. "The node is destabilizing again," Selenia called out, checking her scanner. "The fighting is disrupting the repairs. If it fails now..." "Then we all die," Valeth finished, but she didn't stop fighting. "A worthy end if it purges the alien infection." Lishara's eyes met Ethan's across the chamber. In that brief moment he saw resignation. She was calculating whether she could get him out alive. He refused to accept that equation. "Selenia," he said quietly, "can you trigger a controlled collapse? Seal us in?" Her eyes widened. "That would trap us all." "But it would buy time, force a stalemate," he gestured toward the node. "Maybe I can stabilize this without Lishara's help if you guide me." "You nearly passed out from one connection. Another attempt could kill you." Better than the alternative. Ethan met her eyes steadily. "Do it." She stared at him, then her expression hardened. Her fingers flew across her console. "Charges set, 10 seconds. "Lishara," Ethan shouted, "get clear of the entrance." She didn't question. She drove Valeth back with a powerful strike and moved, her warriors following. Valeth's forces held their positions, confused. The explosion was precise. Rock and crystal cascaded down, sealing the tunnel completely. Dust filled the chamber. When it cleared, Valeth stood with her warriors near the blocked entrance, fury in every line of her body. Lishara and her guards had taken position near the node crystal, protecting Ethan and Selenia. "You've sealed your own tomb," Valeth said. "I've bought us time to talk," Lishara countered. She held her weapon defensively rather than aggressively. "Commander, you've served Azureth for 3 decades. Look at the situation objectively." "I see a queen who has forgotten what makes us strong. I see a commander who mistakes rigidity for strength." Lashara's horns glowed brighter. "Our people are dying, Valeth. Birth rates decline. Colonies fail. Traditional approaches solve nothing." She gestured toward Ethan. "He saved Veilstrom when 17 specialists could not. He stabilized this node using methods we would never have considered. That is adaptation, not weakness." "It is surrender," Valeth spat. "Acceptance that we are insufficient without alien interference. It is acknowledgement that different perspectives have value. That connection across species is possible without erasure." Another tremor. The node crystal pulsed with sickly yellow light. Temperature rose noticeably. "Continuing this debate while the node fails serves neither position," Lashara said. "Allow Dr. Cross to attempt stabilization. If we all die here, your ideology dies with us." Valeth's jaw worked, conflict evident. Finally, she gestured sharply to her warriors. "Stand down, but if we survive, this is not finished." "I would expect nothing less," Lashara said quietly. She turned to Ethan, and the expression on her face made his chest tighten. Trust mixed with fear, hope mixed with guilt. She was putting everything in his hands. "Tell me what you need," she said. "Selenia's guidance," he replied, "and your confidence that I can do this." "You have both." She reached out and took his hand, squeezing once. Brief but deliberate, witnessed by everyone. "I believe in you." Ethan moved to the node crystal with Selenia. She pulled up complex diagrams, explaining parameters in rapid technical language. He absorbed what he could, but ultimately the connection wouldn't be purely technical. It required intuition. "Ready?" Selenia asked. He placed both hands against the crystal and closed his eyes. Without Lishara as a filter, the connection hit like a physical blow. The node's pain slammed into his consciousness, overwhelming and vast. He felt himself spiraling into chaos. Then, impossibly, he felt Lishara's presence, not as strong as before, but there. A thread of consciousness reaching toward him. She wasn't touching the crystal, but their earlier connection had left traces, echoes of her strength, her certainty. Ethan grabbed onto that thread like a lifeline. He couldn't stabilize the node through force of will alone. He needed to understand it, to listen. The node wasn't just machinery or biology. It was part of a network alive for 3,000 years, maintaining balance, preventing catastrophe. It had purpose, identity. Right now it was terrified of failing. "I understand," Ethan whispered. "I understand the weight, the responsibility, the fear that you're not enough." He felt the node's attention focus on him, vast and alien and somehow comprehensible. "But you don't have to carry it alone," he continued. "That's what connection means, distributed strength, shared burden." He thought of Veilstorm and Lashara, of symbiotic bonds that worked because neither carried everything alone. Let others help you. You're not failing, you're adapting. The node's pulse began to slow. Yellow light shifted toward amber. Temperature dropped. Ethan kept talking, kept projecting calm and understanding. Selenia called out technical adjustments, and he translated them into emotional language the node could comprehend. Minutes stretched, sweat soaking through his suit, muscles trembling from sustained tension. Then finally the crystal turned blue. Stable blue, like Veilstorm's scales after recovery, like Lishara's skin, the color of health and balance. Ethan opened his eyes and collapsed. His legs stopped functioning, all energy spent. Before he hit the ground, arms caught him. Lashara had crossed the chamber in seconds, supporting his weight, lowering him gently. "You did it," she said softly, her sapphire eyes bright with something that might have been tears. "By all the ancestors, you actually did it." "Team effort," he managed. "You were there. I felt you." Her hand came up to cup his face, thumb brushing across his cheek. The gesture was tender in a way that made his breath catch. "Rest. We'll find a way out." Across the chamber, Valeth stood motionless, staring at the stabilized node. Her expression was complicated, anger and confusion, and something that might have been the first crack in certainty. "This proves nothing," she said, but the words lacked conviction. "It proves possibility," Lishara countered, not looking away from Ethan, "which is more than we had yesterday." The sound of movement from the blocked tunnel drew everyone's attention, voices calling from beyond, rescue teams, drawn by seismic activity and communications blackout. "We're here," Lishara's lead guard shouted back. "Queen Lishara is safe. Begin excavation." It took 6 hours to clear enough debris for passage. During that time, an uneasy truce held. Ethan recovered slowly, strength returning in increments. Lishara remained close, though she'd resumed her formal posture once initial relief faded. She had to project authority, particularly with Valeth watching. But occasionally her eyes would meet his, and in those brief moments he saw past the queen to the woman who'd trusted him with everything. When they finally emerged into the upper tunnels, Ambassador Torval waited with a diplomatic escort. His weathered face showed relief that shifted to concern when he saw Valeth and her warriors. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "we were told there was an incident." "Commander Valeth will be confined to quarters pending formal inquiry," Lishara said, her tone allowing no argument. "The charges are sabotage and attempted assassination." Valeth's hands clenched, but she didn't resist as guards moved to escort her away. As she passed Lishara, she leaned in close. "This is not over," she said quietly. "Even if you exile me, there are others who share my beliefs. Your human will not be safe." Then she was gone, led away by guards. Lishara stood perfectly still for several heartbeats before releasing a breath that might have been relief or exhaustion, or both. "Dr. Cross requires medical attention," she said to Torval. "See to it personally." "Of course, Your Majesty." Torval moved toward Ethan, but Lishara held up one hand. "Wait." She turned to face Ethan fully, and this time she didn't hide what showed in her eyes. "What you did today, the risks you took, the trust you showed, I will not forget it. When you have recovered, I would speak with you privately. There are matters we must discuss." It wasn't a request, but it wasn't quite a command either. Something personal offered in the spaces between protocol. "I'll be there," Ethan said quietly. She nodded once, then turned and strode away, her guards falling into formation. Ethan watched her go, aware that whatever conversation waited would change everything between them. Medical cleared Ethan after 8 hours. No permanent neural damage, just exhaustion. Ambassador Torval offered immediate transport off-world, citing security concerns. Ethan declined. "You're certain?" Torval asked. "Valeth may be confined, but her sympathizers are not." "It was always dangerous," Ethan replied. "That hasn't changed." "No," Torval agreed quietly. "But perhaps what you're willing to risk for has." The ambassador left him in the royal wing quarters. Ethan showered, changed, and tried to quiet the nervous energy thrumming through his system. Lishara had said she wanted to speak with him privately about matters they must discuss. A soft chime at the door pulled him from his thoughts. When he opened it, he found Lishara herself, standing without guards or attendants. She wore simple deep blue fabric rather than ceremonial armor, her white hair unbound. Without the formal trappings of royalty, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "May I come in?" she asked quietly. Ethan stepped back, gesturing her inside. The door closed behind them, leaving them alone. Lishara walked to the window, looking out over the city. Her horns caught the light but weren't glowing, not yet. "I have been queen for 15 years, she said, her back to him. "In that time, I have made thousands of decisions. Political calculations, strategic assessments, each one measured against the survival of my people." She turned to face him, and her sapphire eyes held something raw. "But I have never made a decision based on what I wanted, on what I felt." Ethan's throat tightened. "Lishara!" "Let me finish." She moved closer, each step deliberate. "When you arrived, I saw you as a tool, a means to an end." She stopped a few feet away. "But you became something else, something I did not expect." "What did I become?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "A mirror," she said simply, "showing me everything I had tried to suppress, every doubt I carried alone, every moment of loneliness I pretended didn't exist." Her hand lifted, hovering between them. "You taught Veilstorm that vulnerability was not weakness, but you also taught me." "I didn't teach you anything you didn't already know," Ethan said. "I just gave you permission to acknowledge it." "Yes." Her horns began glowing softly, amber light warming her features. "And that terrifies me. because acknowledging it means acting on it, and acting on it changes everything. Does it have to change everything? Ethan took a step closer. Or does it just add something that was missing? Lishara's breath caught. My people are not ready for this. For a queen who chooses partnership with an outsider, Valeth represents a faction who see any connection to humanity as contamination. I know. You could be killed, assassinated by those who believe your presence weakens us. I know. Your own people may reject you, see you as compromised. I know all of this, Lishara. Ethan reached out slowly and took her hand. Her fingers were longer than his, her skin warm against his palm. And I'm still here. She stared at their joined hands, her thumb brushing across his knuckles. Why? You could leave, return to your research, your career, find safety among your own kind. Because I spent my life studying how different species bridge impossible distances, Ethan said. And I finally found someone worth building that bridge with. Lishara's eyes lifted to his, and the emotion in them made his chest ache. You understand what this means? Not just personal risk, but political complexity. You would be consort to a queen, but also perpetual outsider. Your life would never be simple. My life has never been simple, Ethan said, managing a smile. I think I can handle complicated. She laughed, the sound soft and genuine. Then her free hand came up to cup his face, the gesture echoing what she'd done in the node chamber, but slower now, more deliberate. Her thumb traced along his cheekbone. I want this, she said quietly. I want you, not as tool or consultant or political advantage, as partner, as the person who sees past the crown to the woman carrying its weight. I see her, Ethan said. I've always seen her. Lishara's horns blazed with light, and she closed the remaining distance between them. Her forehead came to rest against his, careful of her horns, and they stood like that for several heartbeats, breathing the same air, sharing the same space. This will not be easy, she murmured. No, he agreed, but the best things rarely are. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes, and then she kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, but it deepened quickly into something with more certainty, more hunger. Ethan's hand came up to thread through her white hair while her arm wrapped around his waist and pulled him closer. The height difference meant she had to lean down slightly, but she managed it with fluid grace. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Lishara's eyes had darkened to deep sapphire, her horns glowing so brightly they cast amber shadows across the walls. I need to address the council, she said, her voice slightly unsteady. Make formal declaration of my intentions. There will be opposition. Let me stand with you, Ethan offered. Show them this isn't just your decision, but ours. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Tonight I need to speak with Thelendra. Prepare the political ground. Her hand found his again, squeezing gently. Will you wait for me? As long as you need. She kissed him again, brief but intense, then pulled away and moved toward the door. At the threshold, she paused, looking back. Thank you, she said quietly, for seeing me, for staying. The council chamber was imposing. High ceilings of crystalline structure, circular arrangement of seats occupied by Azurethian nobles and military commanders, all watching with skepticism as Lishara stood before them with Ethan at her side. Voice of Wisdom Thelendra sat in the position of honor. Dr. Selinia occupied a lesser seat, her expression carefully neutral. Several seats sat empty. Valeth's followers either imprisoned or declined to attend. I have called this assembly, Lishara began, her voice carrying absolute authority, to make formal declaration regarding the future of Azureth and the necessary evolution of our culture. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Ethan stood straight, hands clasped behind his back, acutely aware of how small he was compared to everyone else present. Dr. Ethan Cross has proven himself invaluable to our survival, Lishara continued. He saved our guardian when we could not. He stabilized critical infrastructure using approaches we would never have considered. He risked his life repeatedly for a people not his own. She turned slightly, her eyes meeting his with unmistakable warmth. I declare before this assembly my intention to take him as acknowledged partner, to bind my life to his in formal recognition. The murmurs became outcries. Several council members stood, voices raised in protest. One older male, his horns silvered with age, spoke loudest. Your Majesty, this is unprecedented, dangerous. The political ramifications are already in motion. Lishara cut him off, her tone like steel wrapped in silk. Valeth's attempted coup revealed fractures in our society that can no longer be ignored. We are dying slowly, clinging to traditions that no longer serve us. Change is not optional. It is survival. But to choose a human as consort, another council member began. I choose partnership over isolation, Lishara said. I choose demonstrated loyalty over assumed superiority. I choose someone who has proven their worth through action. Her horns glowed brighter, and I choose to model for my people that strength includes the courage to transform. Thelendra rose slowly, her movement drawing attention. Your Majesty speaks wisdom, the elder said. I served your mother and her mother before her. I have watched tradition calcify into dogma, watched our birth rates decline, our colonies fail, our people grow rigid with fear disguised as pride. She looked around the chamber. Change frightens us, but extinction should frighten us more. The human has proven himself, Selenia added, standing as well. His methods saved Veilstorm. His intuition stabilized the node network. His presence has already transformed our understanding of what is possible. Slowly, grudgingly, other voices joined in support. Not all. Several council members remained standing in opposition, their expressions hard with disapproval. But enough agreed. Enough saw the necessity. Lishara waited until the chamber quieted, then spoke with finality. I do not ask permission. I inform you of my decision as courtesy and respect for this body, but my choice is made. She turned to Ethan, holding out her hand. Will you accept this path, knowing all its complications and dangers? Ethan took her hand without hesitation. I will. Her fingers threaded through his, and she faced the council with their joined hands visible to all. Then it is done. 3 weeks later, Ethan stood in the Guardian Chamber where everything had begun. Veilstorm lay in his usual resting place, but his scales gleamed with healthy blue luster, his amber eyes bright with intelligence and contentment. When Ethan placed his hand against those warm scales, Veilstorm huffed softly in greeting. Hello, friend, Ethan said quietly. The drake shifted slightly, bringing his enormous head closer. Ethan felt the rumble of contentment through the connection, and something else, approval. Recognition that the human who'd helped him heal had also helped heal something in his bonded queen. Footsteps behind him announced Lishara's arrival. She'd come alone, as she often did now when visiting Veilstorm. When she reached Ethan's side, her hand found his naturally, their fingers interlacing with practiced ease. The planetary network is fully stabilized, she said, leaning against Veilstorm's side. Selenia reports all nodes functioning at optimal levels. That's good news. Ambassador Torval sent word. The Human Council has formally recognized our partnership. There will be complications, but the foundation is solid. She looked at him, her eyes soft. Your people are more accepting than I expected. Humans are good at adapting, Ethan said. Lishara smiled, then leaned down to kiss him gently. When she pulled back, her horns were glowing with that familiar amber light, and Veilstorm's scales seemed to shimmer in response. I love you, she said simply. You show it, Ethan replied, his hand tightening on hers. That's enough. They stood together in the chamber, two beings from different worlds who'd found common ground in vulnerability and trust. Around them, Veilstorm's presence anchored the moment, proof that connection could transcend impossible distances, that strength and tenderness could coexist, that transformation was not loss but evolution. Outside, Azureth continued its rotation under twin suns. In the city, Azurethians went about their lives with growing acceptance of the small human who walked beside their queen. In council chambers, debates continued about the future and necessary changes. In dark corners, those who opposed still plotted resistance. But in this moment, in this chamber, there was only peace, only presence, only two people who'd chosen each other despite every logical reason not to, and in doing so had proven that sometimes the greatest act of courage was allowing yourself to be transformed by love.